I was staring at my phone when the world as I knew it shattered into a million pieces. The Facebook notification glowed on the screen, innocent enough at first glance. But what I saw made my blood run cold. There in full color was my father Ethan, my mother Sarah, and the Harrington family all grinning like they had won the lottery, cocktails in hand, on a pristine Hawaiian beach. The caption read, "Making our own memories in paradise, so wonderful to be with the people who truly matter." My grandfather Arthur had paid for this entire luxury trip, a gift meant to bring our family together. Instead, they had lied to him, told him there was a business emergency, and excluded him completely. The man who had sacrificed everything for us, the Marine Corps veteran, who had built his fortune from nothing, had been betrayed by his own son. And I had just witnessed the proof. But before I tell you what happened next, if you are enjoying this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation. Your support means everything, and I read every single comment. Now let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 3 months earlier, Grandpa Arthur's face filled my laptop screen, those Vietnam sharp blue eyes sparkling with boyish excitement. He had just booked an all-expenses-paid Hawaiian vacation for our entire family. A week at the Four Seasons snorkeling luau's everything. After building a real estate empire from nothing, now in his 70s, all he wanted was to make memories with his family. My dad, Ethan, was his only child. Arthur had given him everything: business school, startup capital, unwavering support. All he asked in return was respect and honesty. That turned out to be too much to ask. I had watched my father transform over the years. It started when he married my mother, Sarah. She came from a world where appearances trumped character, where keeping up with the Joneses was a full contact sport. Her parents, Richard and Eleanor Harrington, embodied old money arrogance. Richard ran a commercial real estate company that operated in ethical gray zones. Eleanor was a socialite who measured human worth by zip codes and bank statements. At my parents' wedding 15 years ago, I was hiding under the gift table when Grandpa Arthur pulled my dad aside. His words echoed in my memory. "Son, I like Sarah, but her parents concern me. A man is known by the company he keeps. Do not let anyone compromise your integrity." My father had laughed it off. Over the years, the Harringtons' influence metastasized. Family dinners became showcases for expensive wine and discussions about tax loopholes. My mother made subtle digs about Grandpa Arthur's modest 3-bedroom ranch house, his 10-year-old truck, his flannel shirts. To the Harringtons, he was an embarrassment, a relic from when hard work and honor actually meant something. My dad, desperate for his in-laws' approval, slowly distanced himself. Weekly dinners became monthly, then quarterly. Phone calls went unreturned. And Grandpa Arthur, proud Marine, that he was, never complained. He just kept showing up with a smile and a gift for me. The Hawaiian trip was supposed to fix everything. Arthur had spent months planning it, carefully selecting activities, even upgrading my parents to an ocean view suite. The trip was scheduled for late June. Then I came home early one Wednesday afternoon. I had forgotten my statistics textbook. The house seemed quiet, but as I headed upstairs, I heard voices from my father's study. The door was cracked open. Something about my dad's tone stopped me cold. That particular inflection he used when lying, a slight rise at the end of sentences, like he was trying to convince himself. "Dad, I know how much you were looking forward to this Hawaii trip," my father said, fake sympathy dripping from every word. "But we have a serious crisis at the firm. One of our biggest clients is threatening to walk. We are going to have to cancel." The moment he hung up, my mother's voice cut through the silence, sharp and triumphant. I peered through the crack. Sarah stood behind his desk, smiling. Actually smiling. "Perfect. He bought it completely." My father leaned back. "I still feel bad lying to him." My mother waved dismissively. "Oh, please, Ethan. Your father is too controlling. This way we can actually enjoy Hawaii without him criticizing everything. Besides, my parents are paying for everything now. They have booked us at an even nicer resort. Just us and them. A real family vacation." A real family vacation. As if Grandpa Arthur was not real family. As if the man who built everything we had was just an inconvenience to be managed. I felt like someone had punched through my ribcage and squeezed my heart. I wanted to burst in there to scream at them, but shock paralyzed me. Or maybe it was the sudden realization of who my parents truly were. I backed away silently, grabbed my textbook, and left. That evening, I called Grandpa Arthur. I wanted to tell him everything, but he sounded so upbeat despite the supposed cancellation. Chloe, sweetheart, how are your finals going? Your dad told you about Hawaii, I guess. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, Grandpa, I am so sorry. He chuckled that deep, rumbling laugh that always made me feel safe. Do not worry about it, honey. Business comes first. We will do it another time. Then he said something that shattered me. Actually, I was thinking of offering to help him out financially. Family takes care of family, right? I wanted to scream that his son did not deserve a penny that he was being used. But I could not do it over the phone without proof. So I just said, "You are the best, Grandpa. I love you." After we hung up, I made a decision. If my parents were going through with this betrayal, I would document everything. The next few weeks were torture. My parents prepared for their trip, buying new luggage, talking excitedly about Hawaii with the Harringtons. They never mentioned Grandpa Arthur except to rehearse their cover story. I played along, pretending ignorance while seething inside. The Harringtons came over several times. Richard would smoke cigars and talk about his deals with nauseating arrogance. Eleanor would make passive-aggressive comments about vacationing with people who appreciated the finer things. The implication was clear. Grandpa Arthur would have ruined their upscale experience. Finally, they left. I stayed behind, supposedly for a summer internship. The truth was, I could not bear participating in their deception. For the next week, I watched photos flood the Harringtons' social media. Eleanor posted constantly. Tropical drinks by the pool, sunset dinners at expensive restaurants, zip-lining through rainforests, everyone grinning like they were living their best lives. My parents looked happier than I had seen them in years. Why would they not? They had gotten exactly what they wanted without the obligation of including the man who actually wanted to bring everyone together. I did not send anything to Grandpa Arthur. I could not bring myself to be the messenger. I kept hoping the universe would reveal their lies without me having to wield the knife. The universe obliged on day 5. Grandpa Arthur, lonely and missing his family, decided to browse Facebook. He was not tech-savvy, but he had created an account to keep up with my life. What he did not realize was that because my mother was Facebook friends with him and Eleanor Harrington was friends with my mother, the algorithm sometimes showed him Eleanor's posts. And that is exactly what happened. Eleanor had made her Hawaii album public, probably to show off to her extensive network. The algorithm decided Arthur would be interested in seeing photos of his son's vacation. When that notification popped up on his tablet and he clicked it, everything changed. The first photo was damning. Ethan and Sarah laughing on Waikiki Beach, with the Harringtons' The Four Seasons visible behind them, but the caption drove the knife home. Making our own memories in paradise, so wonderful to be with the people who truly matter. Grandpa Arthur later told me he sat there for 5 full minutes staring at that photo. Then he clicked through the entire album. 37 photos total, his son parasailing, his daughter-in-law at a spa, the whole group at a luau toasting with champagne. In every single photo they looked blissfully happy, and in every single photo there was undeniable proof there had never been a business emergency. His son had looked him in the eye and lied, used the voice Arthur had taught him to speak with, and fabricated a complete story. Why to vacation with his in-laws instead? That is when something in my grandfather changed. He did not call me. He did not call my father. Instead, he went to his study, the same one where he had planned his missions in Vietnam, where he had built his business empire, where he had taught my father the values of honor and integrity. He pulled out a leather-bound notebook, the kind he used to use for military operations. On the first page, he wrote in his precise handwriting, Operation Justice. Below that, he wrote the date, the time he discovered the betrayal, and a detailed account of what he had found. Then he began to plan. Over the next few days, Grandpa Arthur moved with the precision of the Marine he had once been. He contacted his attorney, David Chen, a sharp lawyer who had handled his business affairs for 20 years. He scheduled comprehensive cognitive and neurological evaluations with 3 different specialists. He knew that when he made his move, there would be accusations that he was not in his right mind, that he was being manipulated, or was suffering from dementia. He wanted ironclad proof that he was completely lucid and in full control of his faculties. The doctors put him through batteries of tests, memory evaluations, problem-solving exercises, psychological assessments. All 3 gave him perfect scores. One doctor even noted in his report that Arthur had the cognitive function of someone 20 years younger. Next, he worked with David to create an irrevocable trust. This was the nuclear option, the financial equivalent of scorched earth. An irrevocable trust, once established, cannot be changed or dissolved. Arthur transferred the entirety of his estate into the Vance Veterans Family Support Fund, a charitable trust that would provide housing and support services for homeless veterans and their families. The fund was real. Arthur had been quietly supporting veterans' causes for years, but now he made it official and permanent. Every property he owned, every investment account, every asset would eventually go to help the men and women who had served their country. His son would inherit nothing. But Arthur was not done. He also had David begin discreetly investigating Richard Harrington's business dealings. Arthur had always suspected that Richard operated in ethical gray zones, and he wanted ammunition. David hired a forensic accountant who spent weeks digging through public records, tax filings, and business registrations. What they found was a trail of questionable transactions, aggressive tax avoidance strategies that bordered on evasion, and several deals that had left business partners high and dry. It was not quite enough to guarantee criminal charges, but it was definitely enough to trigger an IRS audit and potentially civil lawsuits. Arthur had David compile everything into a comprehensive report, then locked it in his safe. Insurance, he called it. By the time my parents returned from Hawaii, tanned and relaxed, Arthur had everything in place. He did not confront them immediately. He wanted them to feel safe, to believe they had gotten away with it. He answered my father's phone calls with his usual warmth, asked about the supposed business crisis, and even offered to help financially if needed. My father, oblivious to the trap being set, brushed off the offers, saying everything had worked out. Another lie. Grandpa Arthur wrote it all down in his notebook. The truth about my father's real financial situation came out about 3 weeks after they returned from Hawaii. Ethan had indeed been having business troubles, but not the kind he had told Grandpa Arthur about. He had, at Richard Harrington's urging, invested a significant portion of his firm's capital into a commercial development deal that Richard was spearheading. It was supposed to be a sure thing, a strip mall in an upcoming neighborhood that would generate massive returns. Richard had painted a picture of easy money, the kind of deal that would finally prove to the Harringtons that Ethan was a serious player. My father, desperate for his father-in-law's approval, had put in $250,000 money that his consulting firm could not really afford to lose. The deal fell apart spectacularly. The zoning approval that Richard had assured everyone was a done deal never materialized. Apparently, Richard had been counting on a city councilman he thought was in his pocket, but that councilman lost his re-election bid. Without the zoning change, the property was worthless. The other investors, all friends of Richard, pulled out immediately. They had the resources to absorb the loss. My father did not. His firm was now on the brink of bankruptcy. He had clients threatening to sue for unfinished projects, vendors demanding payment, and a landlord ready to evict him from his office space. The $250,000 he had lost would have covered all of it with room to spare. For weeks, my father tried to hide the severity of the situation from everyone, including my mother, but eventually the collection calls and the threatening letters piled up too high. Sarah found out, and she immediately turned to her parents. I was not there for that conversation, but my father told me later that it was one of the most humiliating experiences of his life. Richard had shrugged, said something about real estate being risky, and offered no help whatsoever. When pressed, he had actually said, "You win some, you lose some, son. That is business." Eleanor had been even worse, suggesting that perhaps Ethan was not cut out for entrepreneurship and that maybe he should look for a salaried position somewhere. The message was clear. The Harringtons had used my father to pad their own investment, and now that it had failed, he was on his own. That is when Sarah started pressuring my father to ask Grandpa Arthur for money. At first, my father resisted. He still had some shred of dignity left, some awareness that going to his father after what he had done would be incredibly shameful. But Sarah was relentless. She reminded him that Arthur had money sitting in banks doing nothing, that family was supposed to help family, that his father would never let him fail. She even recruited her parents to the cause. Richard told my father that sometimes you have to swallow your pride for the sake of your family. The irony, of course, was completely lost on all of them. Finally, after 3 weeks of pressure and mounting financial disaster, my father broke. He called Grandpa Arthur and asked if they could meet, said he needed to talk about something important. Arthur, who had been waiting for this moment like a spider waiting for a fly, agreed immediately. They set a meeting for the following Saturday afternoon at Grandpa's house. I knew none of this was happening until the night before the meeting. My father had been keeping me in the dark, probably ashamed to tell me how badly things had gone. But that Friday evening, my mother called me crying. She told me everything. The failed investment, the financial crisis, the meeting with Grandpa Arthur the next day. She actually asked me to come to the meeting, thinking that my presence might soften Arthur up, make him more likely to help. I told her I had plans I could not cancel, which was true. I had a shift at the campus library, but the real reason I refused was that I could not bear to watch my father humiliate himself like that. And part of me, a dark, vengeful part, that I am not proud of, wanted him to face Grandpa Arthur alone. That Saturday afternoon, while I was shelving books and helping students find research materials, my father drove to Grandpa Arthur's house. He had rehearsed his speech for days. He was going to be humble, contrite, honest about his mistakes. He was going to appeal to his father's better nature, to the bond they had once shared. He truly believed that his father, despite everything, would help him. After all, Arthur had always been there before. Why would this time be any different? My father pulled into the driveway at exactly 3 o'clock. Grandpa Arthur was waiting on the front porch, sitting in his rocking chair, a glass of iced tea in his hand. He looked calm, almost serene. He waved as my father got out of the car, called out a greeting like it was just another Saturday visit. My father said later that this put him at ease. He thought maybe Arthur did not know about Hawaii, or if he did, had chosen to forgive and forget. That hope lasted exactly as long as it took for him to climb the porch steps. Grandpa Arthur stood up and gestured to the door. "Come on in, son. Let us talk." They went inside to the living room, the same room where I had spent countless Sunday afternoons as a child, playing board games and listening to Grandpa's war stories. Arthur offered my father a seat on the couch, then settled into his worn leather armchair. "So," he said, his voice neutral, "you said you needed to talk about something important." My father launched into his prepared speech. He talked about the business difficulties, the failed investment, the pressure from clients. He carefully avoided mentioning Richard Harrington's role or the fact that the money had been lost in a speculative real estate deal. Instead, he painted it as a general economic downturn, the kind of thing that could happen to any business. He talked about having employees who depended on him, about his reputation in the community, about wanting to maintain the family name. Grandpa Arthur listened without interrupting. He sipped his iced tea, nodded occasionally, his face an unreadable mask. When my father finally wound down, there was a long moment of silence. Then Arthur said, "So you need money. How much?" My father swallowed hard. $250,000. I know it is a lot, but I would pay you back. We could draw up a contract, set up a payment plan. I just need some time to get back on my feet. Arthur nodded slowly. "Family helps family," he said, echoing the words he had said to me on the phone weeks earlier. "That is what I have always believed." My father's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Dad. You have no idea what this means. I will make this right, I promise." Arthur stood up. "Wait here," he said. "Let me get something from my study." He walked out of the room, leaving my father alone with his thoughts of salvation. Ethan actually texted my mother right then. I saw the message later. It said, "He is going to help. I told you he would come through." My mother texted back a series of celebratory emojis. They thought they had won. Grandpa Arthur returned carrying a manila folder thick with documents. He did not sit back down. Instead, he stood in front of my father and placed the folder on the coffee table. "Here," he said, "this is what you need." My father reached for it, confused. This was not a checkbook. These were papers. He opened the folder and started reading. The first document was a printout of the invoice for the Hawaiian vacation. Every charge was itemized. The resort booking for 5 people, the activities, the meals, all prepaid by Arthur. Highlighted in yellow was the notation, "Paid in full by Arthur Vance, March 15th. The second document was a series of screenshots from Eleanor Harrington's Facebook page. The beach photos, the captions, all printed in color time, stamped with a digital forensics expert's certification attached verifying their authenticity. My father's hands started shaking. His face went from tan to ashen in seconds. He looked up at Arthur, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Arthur's face was like granite. "Keep reading," he said coldly. The next document was a single typed page. It said, "The price of your lie is your inheritance." Below that was a summary of the irrevocable trust showing that Arthur's entire estate, valued at approximately $4.2 million, had been transferred to the Vance Veterans Family Support Fund. My father's name appeared nowhere in the trust documents. He had been completely cut out. The final page was a letter from David Chen, on official letterhead, confirming that the trust had been properly executed, that Arthur was of sound mind, and that the decision was final and could not be contested. My father made a sound like a wounded animal. He stood up, the papers falling from his hands and scattering across the floor. "Dad, please," he managed to say. "I can explain. We can talk about this." Arthur just stared at him, and in that stare was every bit of disappointment, betrayal, and cold fury that he had been holding inside for weeks. "Marines do not abandon their brothers," he said quietly. "I taught you that. I taught you about honor, about loyalty, about keeping your word. And you repaid me with lies. You looked me in the eye and lied to me so you could go play with your new family." My father tried to respond, but the shock was too much. The room started spinning. He had not eaten much that day. His stomach had been in knots with anxiety. The sudden revelation of the complete reversal of what he had expected, the realization of what he had lost it all, hit him at once. His vision tunneled. He heard his father say one more thing: "You are not my son anymore." And then everything went black. Ethan collapsed, his head hitting the coffee table on the way down before he crumpled to the floor. Grandpa Arthur did not panic. Years of military training had taught him to stay calm in a crisis. He checked my father's pulse, found it strong, and called 911. When the paramedics arrived 10 minutes later, they found Arthur sitting calmly in his chair, my father unconscious on the floor, and those damning documents spread around like fallen leaves. The paramedics stabilized Ethan and transported him to the hospital. Arthur rode along in the ambulance, silent and unmoved. At the hospital, after my father regained consciousness, and the doctors determined he had just fainted from shock and stress, Arthur left without saying a word. He went home, added a detailed entry to his notebook about what had transpired, and then called David Chen to report that Phase 1 was complete. I found out about all of this when Sarah called me hysterical from the hospital. She was screaming about how Arthur had tried to kill my father, how he was a crazy old man, how they were going to sue him for everything. I drove to the hospital immediately, my mind reeling. When I got there, I found my father in a hospital bed staring at the ceiling, looking like he had aged 10 years in one afternoon. My mother was pacing on the phone with her father, Richard. I could hear Richard's voice booming through the speakers, saying things like elder abuse and undue influence, and we will destroy him in court. I sat down next to my father's bed. "Dad," I said quietly, "what happened?" He turned his head to look at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. "He knows," he said, "about Hawaii, about everything, and he has disinherited me, Chloe. I have lost everything." My mother whirled around. "No," she said fiercely. "We are going to fight this. My father has lawyers. We are going to prove that Arthur is senile, that his lawyer manipulated him. We are going to get what is rightfully ours." I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I saw her clearly, not as my mother, but as a greedy, entitled woman who had helped destroy my father's relationship with his own father. "Nothing is rightfully yours," I said. "You lied. You both lied to a good man who only wanted to spend time with his family, and now you are facing the consequences." Sarah's face turned red. "You do not understand, Chloe. Your grandfather is controlling. He has always been controlling. We just wanted one vacation without him criticizing everything we do." I stood up. He was not invited to criticize. He was invited to be family, and you treated him like he was worthless, like his feelings did not matter, like his money was the only thing about him that had value. I looked at my father. "Did you even consider how much you hurt him?" My father closed his eyes. "I did not think he would find out," he whispered. And there it was, not remorse for the action, but regret at being caught. I left the hospital that night feeling sick to my stomach. I drove straight to Grandpa Arthur's house. I found him in his study writing in his notebook. When he saw me, his face softened for the first time since this all began. "Chloe," he said, "I am sorry you had to be in the middle of this." I hugged him and I cried. "I am so sorry, Grandpa. I knew about Hawaii before they went. I should have told you." He held me at arm's length and looked into my eyes. "You were in an impossible position. I do not blame you for that. But I need you to understand something. What I did today was not revenge. It was consequences. Your father needed to learn that actions have prices, and some prices are very steep." Over the next few days, the situation escalated. Richard and Eleanor Harrington mobilized for war. Richard called Grandpa Arthur directly, threatening lawsuits, claiming elder abuse, saying they would expose him as a vindictive old man who was punishing his son for wanting independence. When Arthur calmly refused to back down, Richard showed up at the house with Eleanor. I was there that day, having decided to stay with my grandfather to support him. When the Harringtons arrived, they did not knock. Richard simply opened the front door and walked in like he owned the place, Eleanor trailing behind him in her designer clothes and oversized sunglasses. "Arthur," Richard boomed, his voice filled with false authority. "We need to talk about the situation like reasonable adults." Grandpa Arthur was sitting in his armchair, a book open in his lap. He looked up slowly, his eyes cold. "You are in my home uninvited, Richard. I suggest you leave before I call the police." Eleanor stepped forward. "Now, Arthur, there is no need for hostility. We are family." Arthur's laugh was bitter. "Family, that is interesting coming from you. Family does not lie to each other. Family does not use each other for financial gain. Family does not exclude people and then gloat about it on social media." Richard's face turned red. "That was a private vacation. We had every right to invite who we wanted." Arthur stood up, and despite being in his 70s, despite Richard being 20 years younger and 3 inches taller, Arthur's military bearing made him seem like the more formidable presence. "You had every right, but Ethan did not have the right to lie to me about why he was canceling the trip I had paid for. He looked me in the eye and made up a story about a business emergency, and you encouraged it. You wanted me excluded because you think I am beneath you." Eleanor made a dismissive gesture. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Arthur, you have to admit you are a bit rough around the edges. We just wanted a more refined experience." The insult hung in the air like a grenade. Before Arthur could respond, Richard jumped in with his real agenda. "Look, we did not come here to argue. We came to tell you that we are going to contest this trust. We have already spoken to lawyers. They tell us we have an excellent case. We will argue that you were not in your right mind, that your attorney took advantage of you, that you were acting out of spite rather than sound judgment. And when we win, not only will Ethan get his rightful inheritance, but we will sue you and David Chen for emotional distress and punitive damages." Arthur walked over to his desk and picked up his phone. "David," he said when his attorney answered. "They are here. You can come out now." David Chen emerged from the back hallway where he had been waiting. He was carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Harrington, Mrs. Harrington," he said with a polite nod. "My client anticipated that you might make these threats, so we have prepared a response." David opened his briefcase and removed 2 sets of documents. He handed one to Richard. "These are the neurological and psychiatric evaluations performed on Mr. Vance by 3 independent physicians. As you can see, he scored in the superior range on all cognitive tests. There is no medical basis whatsoever for a claim of diminished capacity." Richard barely glanced at the papers. "Doctors can be bought," he sneered. David smiled. "Not these doctors. They are among the most respected in their fields, and each evaluation was video recorded in its entirety. We have hours of footage showing Mr. Vance's completely lucid and rational state of mind. But that is not all." David handed Richard the second set of documents. "This is a comprehensive report on your business dealings over the past 10 years, Mr. Harrington. It details several questionable transactions, including the recent strip mall deal that caused Mr. Ethan Vance significant financial loss. It also highlights some very creative tax strategies that the IRS might find interesting. If you proceed with any legal action against my client, these documents will be provided to the appropriate federal agencies, and I promise you an audit will find far more than what we have discovered with our limited resources." The color drained from Richard's face. Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Richard, what is he talking about?" Richard's mouth opened and closed. He looked at the documents, flipping through pages that detailed dates, amounts, shell companies, and offshore accounts. His hands were shaking. "This is blackmail," he finally managed to say. David shook his head. "No, Mr. Harrington, this is deterrence. You threaten my client with baseless litigation, and we respond by pointing out that you have far more to lose than he does. Mr. Vance has done nothing illegal. His trust is legally sound. His decision to disinherit his son is his absolute right. But you, on the other hand, have been playing fast and loose with tax law for years. I would strongly suggest you reconsider your course of action." Arthur stepped forward. "Let me make something clear, Richard. I have spent my entire life building something real. I worked with my hands, I served my country. I earned every dollar I have through honest labor. You, on the other hand, have spent your life looking for shortcuts and using people. You used my son to pad your failed investments, you encouraged him to betray me, and now you want to use lawyers to steal what I have built. It is not going to happen." He looked at Eleanor. "And you, with your superior attitude and your obsession with appearances, you taught my daughter-in-law that material things matter more than relationships. You both are poison, and I will not let you destroy what is left of my family." Eleanor's facade cracked. "How dare you speak to us like this? We are respected members of this community." Arthur's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "Respect is earned, Eleanor. Not bought, not inherited. Earned. And you have earned nothing but my contempt. Now get out of my house." Richard looked like he wanted to say something else, but the fight had gone out of him. He had seen enough in those documents to know that Arthur was not bluffing. He grabbed Eleanor's arm and practically dragged her to the door. As they left, Eleanor threw one last barb over her shoulder. "Ethan is better off without you anyway." Arthur did not respond. He just watched them go, then closed and locked the door. After they left, David turned to Arthur. "That went better than expected." Arthur nodded. "They are bullies, David. And bullies only understand strength. They will not bother us again." He was right. Over the next week, we heard nothing from the Harringtons, but we did hear from my father. He called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading. I finally answered on the 5th day. "Chloe," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need you to talk to your grandfather. Please, I have lost everything. My business is failing. I'm about to lose the house. I made a mistake, but does that really deserve this?" I took a deep breath. "Dad, it was not just one mistake. It was a choice. A choice to lie, a choice to exclude him, a choice to value the Harringtons' approval over your own father's feelings. And even now you are not really sorry for what you did. You are just sorry you got caught." He was silent for a long moment, then, "What do you want me to do?" Chloe groveled back. "I will do whatever it takes." That is when I realized something. My father had never learned how to take responsibility. He had been bailed out so many times by his father, by his wife's family, that he genuinely did not understand the concept of facing real consequences. "I want you to be honest," I said, "with yourself, with Grandpa, with everyone. I want you to admit what you did without making excuses. And I want you to understand that you might not get forgiveness. You might not get another chance. That is the reality of the situation you have created." Another week passed. My father's consulting firm officially filed for bankruptcy. The house went into foreclosure. My parents had to move into a small rental apartment, a shocking come-down from their suburban McMansion. Sarah, humiliated, spent most of her time at her parents' house, though even they were keeping their distance, now worried about their own potential legal issues. My father, alone and desperate, reached out to Grandpa Arthur one more time. He sent a handwritten letter delivered by certified mail. In it, he laid out everything. The failed investment, the pressure from the Harringtons, the stupid decision to lie about Hawaii. He apologized not just for getting caught, but for the betrayal itself. He admitted that he had let his marriage and his in-laws corrupt his values. He did not ask for money. He just asked for a chance to prove he could change. Grandpa Arthur read that letter 3 times. Then he called a family meeting. He sent formal invitations to my father, my mother, and surprisingly to Richard and Eleanor Harrington as well. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 3 in the afternoon. Location: Arthur's home. Attendance was described as mandatory. When my father called me confused about what this meant, I told him I had no idea. That was not entirely true. Grandpa Arthur had told me his plan, and he had asked me to be there as a witness. What was about to happen would determine the future of our entire family. Friday arrived. I got to Grandpa Arthur's house early and helped him set up. He had arranged the living room like a courtroom. His armchair was positioned at the head of the room, with additional chairs arranged in a semicircle facing it. On the coffee table, he had laid out multiple folders, each labeled with a name. David Chen arrived at 2:30, carrying his briefcase and wearing his most serious suit. At 2:45, my father and mother arrived, looking nervous and worn down. My father had lost weight, his clothes hanging off his frame. Sarah looked like she had been crying for days. At exactly 3 o'clock, Richard and Eleanor Harrington arrived, their faces masks of anger and indignation. "What is this about, Arthur?" Richard demanded. "We have nothing to say to you." Arthur gestured to the chairs. "Sit down, all of you. What I have to say will only be said once." Something in his tone, the absolute authority of it, made them comply. Once everyone was seated, Arthur stood. He looked at each person in turn. his gaze lingering longest on my father. "We are here," Arthur began, "because this family is broken, and I am the only one who seems willing to acknowledge that fact. For years, I have watched my son drift away from the values I taught him. I watched him marry into a family that prizes appearances over substance, money over character. I said nothing because I believed he was strong enough to maintain his integrity. I was wrong." He picked up one of the folders. "Ethan, you lied to me. You looked me in the eye and fabricated a story so you could exclude me from a vacation I had paid for, so you could instead spend that time with people who see you as nothing more than a mark of fool with just enough money to be worth tolerating." Richard stood up. "I do not have to listen to this." Arthur's voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down, Richard, or I will make that phone call to the IRS right now. David has the number on speed dial." Richard sat, his face purple with rage. Arthur continued, "I have given this situation a great deal of thought. I could simply walk away. I could leave you all to destroy yourselves, take comfort in my wealth, and live out my remaining years in peace. That would be the easy path. But I am a Marine, and Marines do not abandon the mission even when the mission is painful." He looked at Ethan. "Son, I am going to give you one final choice. This is not a negotiation. This is an ultimatum. You will accept my terms completely, or you will walk out that door and never contact me again." My father leaned forward. "What are the terms?" Arthur handed him the folder with his name on it. "Read them, out loud, so everyone can hear." My father opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside was a contract several pages long, written in clear language. He started reading, his voice barely above a whisper. "I, Ethan Michael Vance, acknowledge that I lied to my father, Arthur James Vance, on June 2nd of this year, and continuing thereafter. I acknowledge that I did so in order to exclude him from a family vacation so that I could spend time with my in-laws, Richard and Eleanor Harrington. I acknowledge that my father had paid for the vacation in full, and that my actions constituted both betrayal and theft of his emotional investment." His voice broke on the last words. Arthur gestured for him to continue. Ethan took a breath and kept reading. "I acknowledge that I have allowed my father-in-law, Richard Harrington, to lead me into unethical business decisions that have resulted in financial ruin. I acknowledge that I sought to use my father as a bank to bail me out of consequences I brought upon myself. I acknowledge that I have failed to honor the values my father taught me, and that I have no one to blame but myself." Tears were rolling down my father's face now, but Arthur did not tell him to stop. "As penance for my actions, I agree to the following terms for a period of 12 months. 1, I will work as a laborer for Vance Construction, the construction company, building housing for homeless veterans, under the direction of the Vance Veterans Family Support Fund. I will receive minimum wage for this work. 2, I will attend mandatory counseling sessions twice per week to address issues of integrity, self-worth, and family dynamics. 3, I will have no contact with Richard and Eleanor Harrington for the duration of this 12-month period. 4, I will allow my father complete access to my financial records to ensure transparency. 5, at the end of 12 months, if I have completed all requirements to my father's satisfaction, I will be eligible to apply for a management position with the Veterans Fund at a standard salary. There will be no inheritance. There will be no bailout. There will be only the opportunity to rebuild my life through honest work." The room was dead silent. Sarah broke it. "This is insane. You cannot force him to work a manual labor job. He has a college degree. He is a professional." Arthur turned to her. "Sarah, you have terms as well." He handed her a folder. She opened it, her eyes widening as she read. "You want me to volunteer at a soup kitchen?" Arthur nodded. "Every Saturday and Sunday for the next year, serving meals to the homeless population, including homeless veterans. You will see firsthand the people whose lives have been destroyed by bad decisions and lack of support. Maybe you will learn something about gratitude." Sarah threw the folder on the floor. "I will not do it. This is humiliating." Arthur's voice was ice. "Then leave. Walk out right now, but understand that if you do, Ethan will have to make a choice. He can go with you and face bankruptcy, foreclosure, and poverty, or he can stay, accept my terms, and have a chance to rebuild. But he cannot have both." Sarah looked at my father, expecting him to stand up for her, but Ethan was staring at the contract in his hands, and something was happening behind his eyes. Maybe it was the weight of his failures finally crashing down, Maybe it was the realization that his father was offering him something no one else would, a path back to dignity. He looked up at Arthur. "What about them?" he asked, nodding toward the Harringtons. Arthur picked up 2 more folders and walked over to Richard and Eleanor. He did not hand them over, he just held them. "You two have no terms. You have a warning. If you attempt to contact Ethan or Sarah during this 12-month period, if you attempt to interfere in any way with their rehabilitation, these folders go to the IRS, the SEC, and every business reporter in the state. Your reputation, your business, your freedom, all of it will be forfeit. Am I clear?" Richard looked like he wanted to explode, but Eleanor put a hand on his arm. She had finally realized they had lost. "We understand," she said coldly. "But when this is over, when your little social experiment fails, do not expect us to welcome them back." Arthur smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I do not expect anything from you, Eleanor. I never have." He turned back to Ethan. "So what is your answer, son? Do you accept these terms?" My father looked at the contract again. Then he looked at Sarah. "I am doing this," he said, "with or without you." Sarah's face went through a series of emotions: shock, anger, fear, and finally resignation. She picked up her folder from the floor. "Fine," she said, "but I am not happy about it." Arthur nodded. "Happiness is earned, Sarah. Right now you are just going to have to settle for survival." Over the next few weeks, the terms were implemented. My father started his job at the construction site. I visited him there once about a month in. The transformation was startling. He had lost the soft office worker physique, replaced by lean muscle earned through real labor. His hands were calloused, his face weathered from working outdoors. But more than the physical changes, there was something different in his eyes. The entitlement was gone. The assumption that things would work out because they always had that was gone too. In its place was something I had never seen in my father before: humility. He was working alongside other men, some of them veterans, some of them recovering addicts, all of them trying to rebuild their lives 1 2x4 at a time. They did not know who he was, did not know about his fall from grace. To them, he was just Ethan, the new guy who did not complain and showed up on time. I watched him work for a while, framing a wall. His movements careful and deliberate. During his lunch break, he came over to where I was standing. "Hey, Chloe," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Did not expect to see you here." I handed him a bottle of water I had brought. "I wanted to see how you were doing." He took a long drink, then looked back at the construction site. "It is hard work," he said, "harder than anything I have done before. But it is honest. There is something about building something with your hands, something that will actually house people, actually make a difference. It is not about quarterly reports or client meetings. It is real." He paused. "I have been thinking a lot about Dad, about everything he built. He did not start with money or connections. He started with his hands and his word. And somehow I forgot that. I forgot where I came from." Sarah was having a harder time adjusting. Her volunteer work at the soup kitchen was clearly torture for her. I ran into her there one Saturday when I went to drop off some donations. She was wearing a stained apron, serving mac and cheese to a line of people, many of whom looked like they had not had a hot meal in days. Her face was a mixture of exhaustion and something else I had not seen before: awareness. When she took a break, she sat down heavily on a folding chair. "I had no idea," she said to me. "I had no idea how many people were struggling, how many veterans were living on the streets. Your grandfather brought a man in last week, showed me his service record. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, Purple Heart, and he was living under a bridge because he could not afford rent, and his PTSD made it impossible to hold a job." She looked at her hands, red from washing dishes. "I have spent my whole life worried about the wrong things, worried about what car I drove, what neighborhood I lived in, whether I had the right handbag. And there are people out there who just want a warm place to sleep." I did not say anything. There was nothing to say. She was figuring it out on her own, which was the point. Arthur was not just punishing them. He was trying to salvage whatever humanity they had left. The Harringtons, true to form, disappeared from our lives completely. I heard through friends that Richard's business was struggling. Nothing catastrophic, but several clients had left spooked by rumors about his business practices. Whether those rumors came from Arthur or emerged naturally, I never knew. Eleanor apparently told people that Ethan and Sarah had moved away for work opportunities, maintaining the fiction that everything was fine. Pride was all they had left. 6 months into the 12-month program, Grandpa Arthur invited me to accompany him on a trip. "Where are we going?" I asked. He smiled, a real smile this time. Hawaii, he said. I have had these plane tickets for almost a year now. Seemed like a waste not to use them. We spent a week on Oahu. Arthur snorkeled despite his age, claiming the ocean made his old bones feel young again. We went to Pearl Harbor, stood on the deck of the USS Arizona Memorial, and Arthur told me stories about his time in the Marines, about friends he had lost, about the meaning of service. We had dinner on the beach, watched the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. And for the first time since this whole mess began, Arthur seemed at peace. On the last night of the trip, we sat on the balcony of our hotel room, listening to the waves. "Do you think Dad will make it?" I asked. "Will he finish the 12 months?" Arthur was quiet for a long time. "Honestly, I do not know. Part of me hopes he does. Part of me wonders if I'm asking too much. But here is what I have learned, Chloe. You cannot save people from themselves. All you can do is provide them with the tools and the opportunity. Whether they use those tools is up to them." "Do you forgive him?" I asked. Arthur looked out at the ocean. "Forgiveness is complicated. I do not hate him. I do not wish him ill. But forgiveness, real forgiveness, requires more than just saying sorry. It requires change. It requires proving over time that you are not the person who hurt someone. Ask me that question in 6 months after the year is up. Maybe I will have an answer then." We returned from Hawaii, and life continued its new normal. I went back to school, finished my degree, started applying for jobs. My father kept working construction. Sarah kept serving meals. And Grandpa Arthur kept building his veterans housing project, each new building a testament to his belief that everyone deserved a second chance. Well, almost everyone. The 12-month mark finally arrived. Arthur scheduled a final meeting, just him, my father, and David Chen. I was not invited, but my father told me everything afterward. They met at Arthur's house in that same living room where this had all begun. Arthur had a folder thicker than before. "Ethan," he said, "you have completed the 12 months. Every requirement, every obligation. David has reviewed your financial records. You have been living within your means. Your counselor reports significant progress. The construction foreman says you are one of his best workers. You have done everything I asked." My father waited, hardly daring to breathe. "So what happens now?" Arthur opened the folder. "Now you have a choice. I am offering you a position as a project manager for the Veterans Fund. $50,000 a year to start health insurance retirement plan. You would be overseeing construction projects, working with contractors, managing budgets. It is real work, real responsibility, but it is also a real opportunity." "What about the inheritance?" my father asked. Arthur shook his head. "Gone. The trust is irrevocable. When I die, everything goes to the fund. That will never change. But what I can offer you is something better than money. I can offer you purpose. I can offer you the chance to build something that matters, to use what you have learned this year to help other people rebuild their lives." He paused. "The question is that enough for you, or are you still the man who measures his worth by his bank account?" My father did not answer right away. He sat there in that same spot where he had collapsed a year earlier and thought about everything that had happened. Finally, he said, "I will take the job. And Dad, I know I do not deserve this, but I want you to know something. This year has been the hardest of my life, but it has also been the most important. You did not just punish me. You saved me. I was drowning in my own bullshit, excuse the language, and I did not even know it. You threw me a lifeline even though I did not deserve one, so thank you." Arthur nodded slowly. "Do not thank me yet. This job is not a gift. You will earn every penny, and if you screw up, if you fall back into your old ways, you are done. No second chances after this." My father stood and extended his hand. Arthur looked at it for a moment, then took it. It was not a hug, it was not complete reconciliation, but it was a beginning. That was 8 months ago. Today, I am sitting in my own apartment, the one I can afford, because I got a good job and learned from watching my family implode that you should never rely on anyone else for your security. My father is still working for the Veterans Fund, and from what I hear, he is good at it. He and Sarah are still together, though they live simply now in a modest apartment, driving used cars, eating dinner at home instead of expensive restaurants. They see the Harringtons occasionally, but the relationship has cooled. Richard and Eleanor do not understand the new version of their daughter and son-in-law. These people who talk about affordable housing and veteran services instead of country clubs and investment portfolios. Grandpa Arthur turned 75 last month. I threw him a small party, just a few of his veteran buddies, David Chen, and yes, my father and mother. It was not comfortable. There were awkward silences and careful conversations. But there was also laughter, mostly from Arthur, telling inappropriate stories from his Marine days. As I watched my father help clean up afterward, washing dishes next to his father in companionable silence, I realized that maybe this was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not erased, but moving forward. Is honor something you can teach? Can you force someone to become a better person? I do not know, but I do know that my grandfather tried. He could have just cut my father off, walked away, let him destroy himself. Instead, he offered the hardest gift of all, accountability. He did not rescue my father. He gave him the tools to rescue himself. Whether that was justice or mercy or some combination of both, I will leave for you to decide. I still have the postcard Arthur sent me from Hawaii, from that solo trip he took after everything went down. On the front is a picture of a beach at sunset. On the back, in his careful handwriting, it says, "Freedom is not about who you travel with. It is about the peace in your soul when you arrive." That postcard sits on my desk, a reminder that sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who refuse to let us get away with our worst behavior. That true family is not about blind loyalty. It is about holding each other accountable. It is about believing that people can change, but only if they are forced to face the real cost of their choices. So here is my question for you. If someone you loved betrayed you, not out of malice, but out of weakness, out of a desire to fit in, or please others, would you have the courage to do what my grandfather did? Would you risk the relationship to save the person? Or would you look the other way, enable the behavior, and watch them destroy themselves slowly? It is easy to judge from the outside, but when it is your child, your parent, your partner standing there asking for forgiveness, offering excuses, promising they will change, what would you really do? If this story resonated with you, if you have ever been in a position where you had to choose between loyalty and principles, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below, share your story. And if you believe in the power of accountability and the idea that true love sometimes means tough love, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories like this. More lessons about what it really means to be family, to have honor, to rebuild after betrayal. And maybe, just maybe, your comment will help someone else who is facing their own moment of truth. Remember, you cannot control what others do to you, but you can control what you do in response. Choose wisely.